Welcome to the January 20th meeting of the Transportation and Public Safety Committee. Welcome, everyone. We will call the roll and everyone's name shortly. Our protocols for this, has anybody asked for accommodation? Have we received any requests for accommodation?
We have not.
Okay, so no requests for accommodation, so we will conduct the meeting as we normally do it. We will during the agenda items, what we normally do is board committee members first, any attending board member later, next, and then we give a couple of minutes for the public to be heard on specific agenda items. At the end of the meeting, we also have a community forum where anyone from the public who wants to raise any issue of community concern is free to do so, and we welcome those comments because, frankly, it allows us to hear from the community what their concerns are. We also welcome the comments during the agenda items because, frankly, it illuminates the board and the members as well. What we ask, of course, is that the non-board members not limit their discussions to 2 minutes. We have a countdown clock for that. We are happy to hear from you, but we like to try to get through the agenda. With that, John, can you call the roll, please?
Sure. Chair Sidney Meyer.
Present.
Secretary John Quint, present. Ernest Augustus.
Here, present.
Sandy Balboza. I saw you, Sandy.
Yeah, I see you there.
Unmute, say hello.
Hello.
Juliet Cullen-Chung.
Here.
John Dew. I didn't see him. Cheryl Gelbs.
Here.
Kate Gilman.
Present.
Brian Howell.
Here.
Patrick Kalaki. He indicated he's going to be in and out tonight.
Right.
And Cyril Scala.
And I would expect John
Here.
he would be on by phone only later, so I would assume he'll be here later.
Okay, so we have a quorum.
We also asked during the meeting that unless you're called on, you keep your you stay muted. It allows so we don't get extraneous noises on it. Would appreciate everyone doing that. So the next thing is to approve the agenda. Everyone seen the agenda? Any objection to the agenda? Can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Cyril, and that was Cheryl. Any objections? Hearing none, the agenda is approved. The next thing is the approval of the minutes from December 16th. Has anyone got a chance to see them? Any comments or correction?
Motion to approve.
That was Cheryl. Any seconded?
Second.
Juliet, all in favor? Any opposition? Any abstentions? None. So tonight, what I want to do is to try to set a roadmap for the next year to both get specific agenda items, request people like the MTA to come in, and to try to get a more, I don't know what the better word, something that will give us evidence-based information when we make recommendations. In the past, we get a lot of anecdotal things about corners, about this kind of thing, and I really want to get more scientific in our approach of what the problems are. As you know, the mayor had an announcement yesterday that he has specific requests for changes in transportation that will make streets safer for pedestrians, for the public, and that I think that we should spend some time discussing that. We should discuss a little bit what the governor announced today about things. And if you share, if you allow me to share the screen for a minute. Here's the copy of the press release that the mayor made yesterday. And I'll, for those, if any of you who have not seen it, I'll scroll through it slowly. Because it talks about what the city plans to do. And talks about the tragic increase of the number of fatalities on our streets. And what the city plans to do. And one of the things that the city plans to do is to focus on 1,000 intersections. And what I would like the committee to do is to set priority within the community board of what intersections they believe should be targeted first. We can have a discussion about that. And those, again, it talks about increased enforcement. It talks about new rules that require that if there's a pedestrian in the crosswalk, marked or unmarked crosswalk, so that the cars are supposed to, the vehicles, it's not just cars, it's cars, the trucks, the bike riders are supposed to stop for those people, allow them to cross. So those are all the things that the mayor announced yesterday. And again, if those of you who have not seen this, I commend you to take a read it, because frankly, if you listen to what the Department of Transportation is saying, and what they're doing and what the mayor is doing, that there is an increased priority to de-emphasize the use of cars on the street and parking and everything else. So I think that it's something that you should be familiar with. Now, also at the same time, the governor talked about congestion pricing and toll evaders. Now, one of the problems I see with the city using robotic means at intersections and for speeders is that there is a significant number, and I don't know what the percentage is, of people who are evading those tolls by either covering their license plate, registering out of the state, or doing other things to evade the toll. I think there's a story here in part of this of the MTA bus superintendent who racked up more than $100,000 in unpaid tolls and fines by obscuring his license plate and re-registering the vehicle. What it doesn't say is that the MTA brought charges against him and they did not fire him. They only suspended him. He's back at work as an MTA bus superintendent. And, you know, if the MTA is going to be the primary recipient of the money that comes from congestion pricing, and when their own employees are not are doing what they're doing here to avoid tolls, that really is beyond the pale. And finally, what I'm posting is something that Nicole Murray worked on for me, which is a way of trying to quantify what we are doing and what the city is doing, what the state is doing on things. And these are just ideas. I mean, I don't think we have a way of quantifying all of them. The first one is seeing whether the ADA compliance in the neighborhood is, what the crash statistics are, and how they affect the community, and again, in prioritizing the intersections. I think that these kinds of things help. Yes, speed camera violations, subway stations, entrances, and you know, there's a tremendous amount of data out there, right? But there's no one place that all this data, as it impacts upon us and our committee, whether it's crash statistics, crime statistics, you know, blocked sidewalks, bail reform and rearrest statistics, all these kinds of information exists, but it's extremely hard to put it together. So Nicole and I were talking about this, and we try to see if we can find databases that will help us do it. Obviously, the crime statistics, the city maintains a very high crime statistic information in COPSTAT, and it shows where the crimes occur, when they occur, and the city, I know, targets those areas using COPSTAT through the police in order to decide how they're going to do enforcement. But the
Mr.
same
Meyer?
thing, yeah.
Mr. Meyer, could you hit the plus symbol at the top bar just so we can zoom in on that a bit?
The
It's very
plus-
small.
the
Right above the
plus-
word ideas. There's a plus symbol.
that
No, that's okay. We're just hoping to zoom in. We can't really read this. It's tiny.
Well, you know, what we can do is we after the meeting, all right, we could make it available to all the board members by all the committee members, excuse me, by sending it around. So that's sort. I don't know if you want to consider that the chair's rant. I don't think I was ranting too much, but the idea is try to come up within what the city is doing now. I am also concerned, and I'll say it as well, that the from what I've been seeing from the DOT, and I attended there was a meeting on about what Barcelona is doing on the streetscape, and it's clear from what I've been hearing lately, and I'm concerned about, is that the Department of Transportation seems to be going around community boards as much as it possibly can. That there is a perception, at least out there, that the community boards are pro-car. And while I don't believe that that's true, sometimes perception becomes the reality. And I'm concerned about all these issues. I'm concerned about how this is being perceived. And with that, I'm happy to open up the floor to others to comment and discuss.
Can you hear me, Sid?
Yeah, I can hear you, Ernie. Go ahead.
No, one of the problems is in this narrative that you just made reference to, that the community board is anti whatever. That's not coming from the community. If what we need is to engage the broader community, you're not going to know every intersection and what's happening at every intersection unless you, at least this community board, this committee, and the community board try to have a broader engagement of the various communities. I remember being somewhat, dumbstruck when we were fighting the Clinton Avenue bike lane, and to hear advocates or the Vision Zero advocate to say that Clinton Avenue was unsafe. And I looked at the faces of the people who were present for that meeting. They were dumbfounded. And I remember something that Julia said, just to support what I'm saying, about, I suppose a question to the audience that, we're bringing you safety. Don't you want safety? And the broader community was taken aback. It was the most condescending, patronizing, paternalistic tone. But then you want people to engage in some public policy activity from DOT and to be supportive. I just find that utterly amazing that here's a public policy that the community doesn't have a discussion about, never made, wasn't grounded in, but then DOT wants or to expect, public buy-in without having first to engage the community to begin with. I think this approach now that Mayor Adams is suggesting that is going to require a lot and a broader sense of community engagement. And the only other vehicle for the public to access is the community board. They turn to the community board for input, they turn to the community board for information, but they turn to the community board because they think they're going to get a fair hearing. And so I'll tell you, in Clinton Hill, Fort Greene, people are really put out because they feel that, they're not getting a fair hearing. And in addition, this format, this Zoom virtual reality uh, environment is fatiguing. I mean, even with this meeting, there are a lot of people who are on this call because it's just not conducive. It's almost anti-democratic. People's voices aren't being heard. But that's something that we're going to have to address. And I assume that this sort of public engagement to identify intersections and quarters isn't going to happen in one shot. It may just be evolutionary. It may be several meetings and you start to hear. But we should try to start hearing from the community. And and that's it. But one more other thing, and to prove my point.
Are they finished? So, thank you.
Because you said it, and John Quinn said it about the open street, how we were not engaged, involved with that the board was circumvented, and then for de Blasio administration or even the Adams administration to expect buy-in is just it's amazing.
Okay, who else would like to speak? I'm happy to recognize people.
Sid, John Dew would like to speak.
Okay, John, go ahead.
The city of New York recently lost a lawsuit, and that lawsuit loss requires that the city replace over half of the sidewalk ADA ramps because they are not meeting federal standards for ADA access. Those ramps, of course, lead to the same crosswalks that the mayor has just said are going to be replaced. So this needs to be a combined program. And this needs to be posted and suggested to DOT so that they can take all of what needs to happen and put it into one program. So they can do a corner or an intersection at the same time. The sidewalk replacement, the ADA sidewalk replacement program is rolled out over 10 years. So is there some coordination that can happen so that these programs are implemented at the same time? My next item is that we had, as you know, for many years, a DOT representative at our meetings. That allowed us to access DOT's services immediately. And that representative would come back the following month with a report of what DOT was going to do to solve a particular issue. That has not happened for years now. We are losing as a community because we don't have direct access to DOT anymore. DOT is a large department. New York City is huge. Having a representative 2 hours a month to sit in, or it can even be the first half an hour to sit in and hear the issues from the community and report back the following month. I think we need to ask for it.
Okay.
Because services in downtown Brooklyn from DOT have deteriorated greatly. And my last item, Mr. Meyer, is DOT needs to coordinate with the department, with the MTA. We still have a major disconnect between the two. And if we're talking about anything having to do with cars, we have to have a transportation system that is state-of-the-art, accessible, ADA-wise. That is not the case. We recently heard something about Borough Hall being made ADA compliant. But again, we don't have any direct contact from the MTA or DOT anymore. And so we sit here and talk to ourselves a lot. We have to change that.
Okay, Sarah, you were next.
Yeah, I tend to agree with John and on his on the issues, but I want to get down to something a little more basic. Since we've been on this, I've been on this committee for quite a few years, and on the committee board, I've always wondered where we can specialize and point our voices. We seem to have fallen back and we're on the reciprocal part instead of the active part. What I would hope that with your presentation, Mr. Chairman, what I would hope is that when we have our meetings, we set aside one or maybe two subjects and have a full discussion on them, open discussion with the committee members, and then come up with a resolution. And then that resolution will be written or put on by Taya, and we could send that to whoever the parties that we are sending it to, whether it's the DOT or the MTA or through the office board, whatever is the appropriate method. What I find is we speak to each other a lot, and all of us have very interesting ideas. But what happens is we say goodnight, and then it's over. I mean, I'm speaking for myself. I get involved and I want to see it happen, but I don't see a result. And I think what John said is very true. We should not be ignored. And I think we are being ignored. I'm not, I know it's like we're on a soapbox here, but I think
we're being ignored.
Excuse
We are
me,
being ignored.
this actually is a good time for us to vent. And I've been trying to vent for a long time. I just feel that we're the voice of the community. We should, all I would like to say is instead of talking to each other and talking over each other and disagreeing or agreeing with it, we should, at the end of every meeting, come up with one subject and set that subject straight and send that off to whomever we are sending it to and request an answer with a date and have that person or that department, DOT, MTA, whoever it is, the police department, the DA's office, all these electeds come and speak to us. And we're very polite and we listen to them and we're courteous. However, they work for us. I want us to be more active. That's it.
That's why I like to try to set priorities. I think that's important. I think Kate, you wanted to speak next?
Yeah, I know. Thank you, Sid. I know I'm new to the committee. I've spent most of my first term on economic development, but I just wanted to echo both those thoughts. I think that having representation, having someone who's here in an ongoing basis from DOT makes so much sense and is just a crucial missing part of what seems like communicating with them regularly and not just when we're trying to make noise, but as a real relationship. And then Cyril, what you're saying about having a product post meeting and really making this a noisy committee in the best way. I would fully lend energy to however I can be of service with that said and bring some more workers to the committee. So I am here and in such support of both those things, as well as the ADA kind of tandem construction concerns with timing, John.
Tay actually makes a good point that we've been without a district manager for 13 months, and that's part of the problem. Hopefully that will be remedied soon. Anybody else want to talk? Juliet.
Hi. To the extent that we're thinking about priorities for topics for meetings in the upcoming year, I just wanted to also, mention some things that have come up in the past. Our purview as transportation and public safety is, it's not just crime statistics and public safety with regards to public infrastructure and transit and transportation, but, we delved into the criminal justice system a year and a half ago now in a very in-depth way. And I thought that would be a interesting avenue to continue to pursue. A while back, some people suggested maybe homelessness might be an interesting topic in that it takes place in the public realm oftentimes, but then, also has implications on public safety as we recently, unfortunately, experienced in the past week with the fatality in the subway, in the Times Square subway. So just, if we could take some of this time in this meeting to sort of brainstorm some of the other ideas, ADA accessibility, but also keeping public safety in a broader context, and also in the context of Black Lives Matter, and prioritizing not just transportation issues. That's all I mean. Thanks.
Anybody else would like to talk? John Quinn.
I want to, I agree that, and I enjoyed over all the years I've been on the committee, having somebody from DOT at every meeting, because we could go back to them, we could remind them they wouldn't always take care of things, but at least they were a constant present. And I noted when we started the discussion of the Gates Avenue closing that block of gates to create a space in honor of that infant that was killed, that it was very nice of DOT for the first time in a long time coming to us and not asking us to approve a fait accompli or to decide on something very quickly. And I got, pushback from Commissioner Bray that that's not their way of operating, but we know it has been their way of operating and not coming back to us. And I think what we need, we had for a couple of months a Brooklyn Heights person, a CB2, somebody who lived in the district who was running transportation. Now the commissioner is not in our district, but I hope that he will, and the borough commissioner can be told or can see the value of having somebody on a regular basis. And as was suggested, that the person come first, and because it used to be there were always presentations from DOT, whether it was bike lanes or any of the other different divisions, but we always had the person who came to every meeting knew what was going on in DOT. We can't get that, we need a generalist as opposed to a specialist who can communicate within the divisions of DOT. So, and I agree with Sid that not having a district manager to communicate, but I think even before that process is over, I know that Carol Ann knows how to reach the people in DOT, and I think we need a little lobbying from our chair and from Carol Ann to try in this, it's a new administration after 8 years. Maybe we can go back to what it was even during the prior mayor's administration, but it was long before he became mayor that we always had somebody from DOT at our meetings. Now, we don't always have a DOT issue, and sometimes we can skip DOT when we're doing public safety or something else, but still to know on a regular basis that we're going to have a DOT person, I think is very important.
Those of you who don't know the history, we at one time there was a downtown Brooklyn coordinator who was paid for out of funds that came out of a settlement on I think when we did the downtown rezoning, so that we had at every pretty much, even though he might not have been every one of the meetings, he was essentially assigned to CB2. And I was going to notice that we do have a new city councilman with actually we have two new city council people. We have Lincoln and
Crystal
Hudson, who actually both of them attended the last meeting, and I don't see either of them on my list of attending this meeting. But I do think that we should downtown Brooklyn has a lot of. We have bridges, we've got roads, we've got the triple cantilever, we've got we've got the jail, although I don't know if it's semi-open. We are a hub. We're almost a city within a city ourselves, and not to have a dedicated person coordinating all the transportation issues in this neighborhood is I know the borough commissioner is interested, and I know that he gets involved, but I think one of the things that should come out of tonight's meeting is that we I think we should formally request through our city council people that they provide funds to provide a dedicated CB2 person, a DOT person to downtown, to CB2.
Can we vote on that?
Yeah, can I have a motion?
Let's vote on that.
I-
I'm actually for that. We could vote on that tonight.
All right, so why don't, so who wants to make the motion? Somebody make the motion.
I just made it.
All right, John, do make Ciro seconds it. Any discussion?
Yes.
Yes.
No, discussion, not vote. There's discussion first before. Hearing no discussion.
No,
All
I
in- all-
have my hand raised and, well, both my virtual and my actual hand. And I'd also like a chance to, after this, say my thoughts as well. We did this before, just FYI. We voted to send a letter, and the letter was through unclear means essentially, intercepted at the executive committee level. So without going broader into what I want to talk about to open this, we need to clarify what we want to be and what the board chair and the executive committee are okay with us being. I mean, we don't necessarily have to agree with them, but we tried this avenue before. Why do we think we'll be more successful this time?
I don't know if we will be more successful. I think that I would go through the city council people, see if they can assist in getting it done.
If at first you don't succeed, you try again. I think we have to go forward with additional arguments. We have loads of additional arguments, which we've just described many of before we got to this particular point. We need to line all of those up and request that if it's not approved, give us an alternative that allows us to continue to help our community, because we haven't been able to help the community effectively since we lost that transportation representative.
Is there anybody who wants to be heard on the motion?
Cheryl,
Go ahead, Cheryl.
I agree with Brian. We've gone down this road back and forth and back and forth. And what he is trying to say, Brian, stop me if I'm wrong. He's trying to say, let's not jump above our executive committee and go straight to the city council. We first have to find out in our own shop what it is that Lenny has, what guidelines he has for us this year. Let's not go jumping straight to the city council. Let's first take it to Lenny and the executive committee. Let's find out what it is that he has plans for us this year.
Well, clearly no letter can be written without Lenny's approval. Actually, the letter probably will go out under his signature, but it is a committee recommendation to and ultimately to the full board, what the full board will decide.
Sid, can I just say something? I think.
No, wait a minute. Sarah,
Okay.
Juliet first, please.
Okay, Juliet.
Juliet, you spoke already. Juliet first. Go ahead, Juliet.
I was wondering if maybe a better approach might be for Sid, if you could talk to the chair of the community board. What Brian was insinuating was that it was even though our committee voted to do it, he decided not to. So if you could have a conversation with him, maybe not in the form of a vote, but hey, the committee would like to do this. We really want to get this. It's a new administration. Can we either send a letter either to city council or the mayor, or how can we do this? What's your thoughts? But I don't know that pressuring him with a committee vote is the best way to do it.
Now, Sarah, if you want to speak again, please. Do.
I would say it's in a way, I do agree with Brian and Cheryl, but in a way, I think by discussing it this way, we seem to be going backwards. It happened before, and I think and we're going to get turned down before. That doesn't mean, and I think we have to do it all certainly collegially, and we can't just go ahead. And I don't think any of us who's speaking would want to do that. I just think that as a committee, we could voice some sort of recommendation and let it go through to the committee, to the chairman of the board, and let's see what happens. Otherwise, every time we have a discussion, we're going to have to go through this again. Should we wait? Should we sit down and wait for the board to do this? I think, and I'm not being belligerent, I'm actually agreeing with you, but I think we need to be active. There's nothing wrong with us putting a presentation together and submitting it. That's what we do. That's what we should do. And if we're turned down, of course, the office will give us a reason, and then we go back to the drawing boards. But because we did it again and was turned down, we've been turned down on a lot of things. If we stop doing that, we're in trouble.
Exactly.
Okay, and
Can I?
go ahead, Ernie, you want to go?
Yes. I think that we should function as a committee and make recommendation to the full board, but to have an effective transportation committee, we should behave like an effective transportation committee. I think, Lenny's going to look for direction from a committee. He's not all powerful or all knowing, but the mere fact that we don't make recommendations or suggestions doesn't make us a effective community board. I think that we discussed this. We're realizing that we're not as effective as we want to be or that we should be, and that this may be a remedy to help us along that way. But it's a self-assessment that we're doing to say that how can we be more effective if we do not have a representative present at our meetings, so we can have some input, so that they can get some feedbacks from the transportation committee. I worked for the city for the past 40 years. I used to do this thing, going to community board when we were doing projects, and my thing was to hear from the community and take it back to my commissioners, which I did. And this is the early days when we were addressing homelessness and putting shelters in the neighborhood. I gotten some arrows, but I had to take it back. But I didn't hear that, but they were appreciative. Now I tell John this. I tell John this all the time about my experience. When my commissioner sent me up to the Bronx to discuss something with some businessmen about a shelter, and I came back. I told her that we had X number of support, and she handed me my head. She said, "Ernest, I don't want to hear that. I don't want to know about the people who are supporting this. I want to know the opposition, because that's who we have to deal with." And this is during the Koch administration. So, and I've seen Commissioner Rose over at City Planning hold up a certification of a ULA because he needed to hear from a Staten Island community board. This means that the community board has some input, and we should exercise that responsibility.
Okay, here, any more discussions on this, on the motion? Yes, go ahead, Brian.
So Cheryl and Julia, I think, were agreeing with me, and I want to agree with their comments as well. I'm glad that we started the conversation talking about how we don't think that we're effective, and I think that's a good thing to admit about what we do here, and some of that is on us, and a lot of it is not. But I think we started off the meeting with we should lay out a plan for what we want to be and for what we want to accomplish. And I think that if we want to be effective, we should try to do, yes, you're right. The chair is not the boss of us, in every sense of the term, but I would rather be effective. I would rather get the DOT rep. I would rather do something in a way that the chair is willing to endorse or is willing to put his vocal support behind, than to vote, to grandstand. And I can grandstand just as much as anybody else here. I don't think we need to talk about how important this is. We all agree it's important. The question is, what is most likely to be the effective way of getting what we want? And I don't think that voting on it was effective the last time. I don't think it'll be effective this time. And I think what Cheryl suggested, a conversation between the committee chair and the board chair, is most likely to figure out what sort of letter is the board comfortable writing, and then we'll work from there. I know we're not trying to antagonize the board chair. I feel like our efforts are more likely to be successful if we simply ask what his thoughts and hesitations might be before we do it.
I obviously have I think I have a good relationship with Len, and I discuss these things with him. I personally think we're better off if the committee shows their interest as opposed to my saying, well, the committee is interested. I think you're much better having that discussion with a showing of emotion, saying that the committee is really behind this, not just not me as the board chair. I mean, I'm just a committee chair. I mean, I have one vote at the meetings, but those are all advisory, just like, what we do is mostly advisory. So my own personal opinion is I'm better with a motion from the board, from the committee, showing that they're behind it.
I support that.
I have to say, you are correct. We are a community board. We're not one person. We're a community board. We are allowed to take positions on things. The goal of the community board is to take positions on a lot of things that are going on in our community. We don't call everybody up and have a chat with them. That's just not how the community board is designed to work. We have these committees. These committees are supposed to take definitive action. That's what a community board does.
Okay, so I'm gonna take my prerogative of calling the question. Okay. The question is whether or not that the committee is recommending a letter to the DOT to try to get and to figure out how we can get a DOT representative present at all the meetings of the Transportation and Public Safety Committee. All those in favor?
Wait, I'm sorry, what is the exact, can you just go over that wording one more time before we vote?
That the committee recommends that the community board send a letter to DOT requesting that they reassign a monthly DOT representative to the first part of the community board to Transportation and Public Safety Committee, as we had after the 2004 upzoning.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Is there anyone opposed? Are there any abstentions? Are there any people who are not allowed to vote because of their affiliation? Okay, the motion passes. Now, I would also like to go back and start to talk about the specific, the city is proposing 1,000 intersections to be improved, right? And I would like to see, obviously we received a letter at the board saying that a community member had called 311 and asked that Tillery Street from Flatbush to I don't know how far it was, but Flatbush at least to off the Brooklyn Bridge be part of those intersections, right? Obviously, personally, I think that the intersection at Atlantic Avenue and Flatbush should also be one of those intersections that's specifically done, because we've been asking that for a number of years, and they've made some changes, at least to the 4th Avenue side of that one, but not to the Flatbush Avenue side. What other intersections is the community concerned about? Are there people willing to make, can we, you don't necessarily, we might not want to do this right now. We might want to send a email to Carol Ann, and then, because I think we should try to prioritize these, because if we send them into DOT, I think it probably has a, and I have a note saying, can Nicole pull up the crash mapper so we can look at where the incidents, the crash incidents are highest within the district as well. Anyone else want to comment?
Yeah.
Brian, go ahead.
So sorry, without jumping into, we started at a very high level of like, what do we want to do as a committee? And I feel like we very quickly zoomed in on a particular question, maximum granularity. I would prefer if we didn't sort of, a lot of people talked about representing the community, and there's only a handful of us in here for a community district that's got 125,000 people. Rather than specifying specific intersections, could we try to identify principles or priorities that either we could do or the board office could do, or we could do them together to identify those locations based on data rather than us supplying them. And sorry, I know Juliet recommended Nicole Bolt Crash Mapper, but if we talk about, rather than saying, I think this intersection is dangerous, if we could come up with principles, intersections that have had, say X number of crashes, Y number of injuries. I think that way we can offload, trying to pull up the entire set of them with just the people in this room and come up with a way that those can be identified by anybody.
I think that's a good suggestion.
I'm sorry, I take a different opinion than that. I walk the streets downtown Brooklyn all the time. I have a very good sense of many of the streets in downtown Brooklyn, those that I think are dangerous, specifically everything that crosses Fulton Street and Flatbush Avenue is a problem. It is a problem. And the areas, the streets that are connected to, we've made these suggestions, by the way, in the past over years. Some of the adjustments have been made, others have not. So we have to start with specific. When you give a formula, you're asking somebody else to apply it. We can do that too, but we should also take specific requests from the committee. We do both. It's not one or the other, it's everything.
Well, I frankly like it to be somewhat fact-based. I mean, the anecdotal of walking down the street and seeing issues is helpful, and I think it's an area that should be done. But I think that DOT, I know that DOT is going to look at it fact-based. Kate, you want to say something?
Yeah, I think I'd agree with you and Brian here. I think if we agree on sources that are legitimate, that can give us good statistics within CB2, then we can call from that list. And then if John, I don't know if having some kind of open forum for the community to send their thoughts on this to this committee or to the board for a duration of time. If that request gets enough exposure and visibility in the community, of course, I think welcoming all concerns is the whole point, but I think to be consistent enough and to have the data speak for itself, it'll be more powerful. What we send will be coupled with, here's how we know it, and here's what's been proven. So I think hopefully we could tackle two birds, one stone by just sending out an open call, maybe in a way that's different than what we've done in the past, but I would lean towards relying on one or two sources.
Well, and I also agree with Brian that we should try to figure out a way of doing this systemically. I mean, I'm sorry that I jumped right into this because it is something that's on my mind, and it's been what the mayor did, and I would like to try to get in sooner than later a list of what the community wants as concerned. And I'm not discounting what John says that there may be some intersections that don't show up in the statistics that are just as important. But I really would like the statistics at least to have a backup of where we're going.
Nicole had a question, Sid. I'm not quite sure.
Okay.
I see it. It says no single one of us has any idea which intersection. That's why I want to do the statistical kind of stuff.
Yeah, Sid.
No, I had a question. It was after that, is if the DOT is asking for community board input on this specific thing, because I'm sure they have their own data, or like what would we offer that they don't already have?
Well, I think we may know these intersections, frankly, better than they do. I mean, and while statistics do show, and that's why I said I think statistics do point you in the right direction. That doesn't necessarily mean which intersections are most important to the community. There may be schools at an intersection. There may be some other reason why a particular intersection might be more important to the community than it is to a pure statistic review.
Sid,
Yeah, yes, go ahead, Ernie.
somehow it goes back to reaching out to the local community-based organizations that's in the neighborhoods, churches, institutions. Yeah, I could tell you, because they're at the forefront. Um, I used to Green Avenue and Adelphi Street used to have crashes one after another, and it was the Block Association that took the initiative to reach out to DOT to request to have a traffic light put at that corner. Prior to that, there was a stop sign. But I can tell you, after that traffic light was installed, there were no more crashes, no more accident. Nobody wasn't racing the stop sign to get to Fulton Street. But but that's what neighborhood groups used to do, or still do. Whether they request a speed bump or a stop sign or stoplight, because they know the blocks, they know people talk. I don't know why we like to discount and or to ignore or to diminish neighborhood organization. I can't tell you what's happening on Willoughby and Clinton Avenue, but somebody down there does. The St. Francis College, there's a the Block Association, and that's how you begin to gather information. That's it's not anecdotal. It's that it's been reported. Hello.
Yeah, I heard you.
Okay. All right. I'm finished.
Anybody else wish to speak? Anyone from the community wish to speak?
No, Sid.
Yeah, who?
Hello?
Yeah, Sarah.
What I was going to say is, I think could we possibly set an agenda or timeline on this and try to get the statistics put together? Maybe part of us can do that, or how it could be done, and then formulate a plan against that. I mean, I think Ernest is right, but I also think we have to put something on paper. Maybe we can do some due diligence and look at the statistics, and then make a presentation, maybe at our next meeting or within this meeting and the next meeting. I'm not sure how that could be done, but that may be the way to start.
Anybody else wish to be heard?
Yeah, I just had a thought.
Wait, there's someone who has their hands up.
Okay.
I don't know. It says
Linda Vassal.
Okay, Linda.
Hi, how are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
What I was thinking about is we're looking at, he said 1,000 intersections for the whole city.
Right.
Which seems very small. So we also have to look at how we would prioritize those once we gather the basic information. So there has to be some sort of review to make sure our priorities are in.
Carol Ann just posted that 79% of the intersections where there have been crashes are going to be included in that list.
79?
Am I correct, Carol Ann?
Yes, they're going to target the 79% of the highest crash locations.
So what, you said 79% of 1,000?
No. Let's say that they're, they'll look at the number of crashes at every intersection, and then they'll break it at where at 79% of all the crashes would have occurred at the intersections that they. So it's the intersections with the highest crashes.
So they're actually identified, or they will be identifying most of the intersections that will receive this renovation or whatever.
Well, they're not sure what they're going to do at each one of the intersections. They have a number of things in their toolbox that they could do. They can put on. They can put stop signs. They can put yield signs. They can put lights up. They could They can put crosswalks. They could raise the intersection. There's all sorts of things that can be done, and that while they're planning to do this year, All right, I think the artist says they're gonna try to do this year. Whether they have enough money to do that or staff to do that, I don't know. But at some point, they're gonna have to prioritize them even within that 1,000 based on which ones are most important to do. And
And I'm sorry, I just want to mention that anything the city does, they do not implement it and enforce it properly. If we had enforcement, some of this may have already been reduced, but they need to add the dollars to the enforcement. They say police officers will be doing it. I don't see police officers standing on corners stopping people from turning in the intersections, because that's a rule that we already have. We're not supposed to, we're supposed to come to a stop, and when people clear the intersection, then we move forward. But that doesn't work, or that hasn't been working, or it hasn't been enforced. I don't want to belabor that, but just to say this is step one, but there's a lot of things that would have to be addressed.
But and if you look at the mayor's announcement, he addressed that. I mean, at the presentation, the police commissioner was there, and the mayor very pointedly said is that, you know, he wants the police being, you know, taking their responsibility for enforcing. And you're right. I mean, look, we have a problem in downtown Brooklyn with illegal permit parkers. It's been an issue that's been in the forefront for years and years and years. You know, let's see what happens with that now. We agree that all those issues, it's not one thing. It's not changing the intersection. It's part of an entire picture, and hopefully we'll do that. But they know where the crashes take place and when they take place. They should be out there trying to, you know, just like they do cop stat for where the accidents are. They should be doing crash stat for where incidents take place.
I agree. Thank you.
You're welcome. Unless there's more on this topic, I'm prepared to go on to the next topic, although I see Brian and Nicole want to speak again. Brian, go ahead. Go ahead, Nicole. You haven't spoken yet. You have to unmute yourself.
I'm confused I'm still confused if the DOT is asking for input or yet, you know, God forbid anybody spins their wheels and does some research or outreach or anything, and the DOT is like, sorry, we already picked intersections. If it's 100 per year, Caroline, does that mean they're looking at intersections that have 100 crashes a year at least? Caroline?
I don't know. I only know what I read in the press release.
Right.
Essentially, they'll be doing work on 100 intersections per year.
Got it. Okay. So I was gonna say we don't fit the whatever, but like, yeah, for all we know, there's not any in our community board because there's so many more dangerous areas.
Oh no, I think there's some in the community board.
Well, I don't know, maybe it's one or two, because if they have only 1,000, that's not very many for the whole city. So, you know, God forbid we spin our wheels and, you know, they're like, oh, we only had one plan for Atlantic Avenue or something, you know, what have we done? So I would, you know, I'm just a little bit confused about.
No, but remember, there's other ways of getting money, not just DOT. One of the things that happens is that there's something called member items that, you know, that the council people can specifically target money for things, so that it's not just what DOT does. Okay, the answer is we should look at our neighborhoods and see what's most dangerous, and then try to get them to do them sooner than later. All right, and you're only going to do that if we get the numbers and see what the numbers are, and hear the anecdotal issues of some that might be outside the numbers that may be just as dangerous, in my view. And Brian, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I just want to endorse what Nicole is saying. I mean, if you add up all the anecdotes that we have and then all the anecdotes that none of us in this room have, you'll end up with the data. And I don't know why we're trying to go at it in a way. If DOT is going to, you know, identify those locations, then it's worth asking why we're going to do it. I will say that one of the key reasons why many projects at DOT get delayed is for staffing reasons, and the DOT has said in the past, and you know, council hearings that they, don't necessarily have enough staff to complete the projects that have been mandated. So we have the streets master plan that came into effect at the end of last year. And we're hearing that, the DOT doesn't necessarily have the staff to complete these projects. And now we're adding on more projects. So at the very least, I think it's probably worth asking, because DOT seems to have difficulty asking on its own behalf for given that the city is asking for 3% budget cuts from each of the agencies, except for a handful of very privileged ones, that DOT be funded to be able to complete the projects that it is mandated to complete, and to be able to complete, if they want to make a promise to do 1,000 intersections, that they have the staff to do that. Because otherwise we're just going to keep running into DOT saying, sorry, we're only going to do half of what we plan to do because we don't have the funding for it.
Okay. We want to move on to the next subject, which is, I don't know, this is a request to remove parking at Dekalb Avenue and Flatbush Avenue extension. I'm not exactly sure what this is. I know it wasn't on the agenda before, but I wasn't around when it was first placed. Does anyone know what this is exactly?
Oh, John, you're muted.
John Dewsport.
You have to unmute, John. John, you're on mute. John, we're not trying to mute you, but we can't hear you.
Okay, I'm sorry, I am on mute. It keeps getting put on mute and I don't put it on mute. Yes, years ago, probably.
Very surprising that you're on mute, John.
Years ago, DOT removed parking spots from Ashford Street. And the community board requested that those parking spots be replaced. Those parking spots were replaced on Flatbush Avenue, right before, on DeKalb Avenue, just before the bus stop. And the bus stop was not a problem back then because we had regular buses. Then a few years ago, MTA implemented the long buses on the B38, and they implemented a limited bus service. So that limited bus skips a lot of stops and often arrives at the same time as the standard bus. So it is behind the bus, and the bus opens the doors up right next to the parked cars. It's metered parking. It's metered parking. And so the passengers are discharged in the middle of the street between the bus and the parked cars all the time. It's about 7 spots. So the request, given that these spots were installed at the request of the community board, we have new conditions. So DOT is asked to examine that area to determine whether those cars, all or some of them, parking spots should be removed. At least during the daytime, those 2 buses, it's a problem. It's a dangerous condition for passengers being discharged in the middle of the street. And by the way, when the passengers get off the second bus, they often walk between the 2 buses to see if cars are coming down DeKalb Avenue. And if the cars are stopped, they walk in between the cars. So it's a real dangerous condition that occurs at that corner because of the implementation of limited and longer buses. That's the source of the problem.
Have you made a complaint on this on 311?
No. I have to be honest, Sid, I'm on the community board. It doesn't occur to me to call 311 ever.
Well, if we ask the staff to do this.
Oh, I have no objection to it. I just want it done. I just think but again, we were supposed to have a DOT representative here that would have addressed this problem. I'm sorry, I got spoiled with that, Sid. So it never occurs to me to call 311.
Well, just that in general, I don't, Carol, I'm not going to talk for Carol Ann or but even at DOT, when they have something like this, they're supposed to call it in to 311, so it gets on, it gets on a punch list to get results. So I don't know, if Carol Ann or Taya, Carol Ann will bring this up to DOT, the chances are all that's going to happen to us, it's going to get put in as a request to, and maybe it's going to be a request to remove the parking. I mean, that's how it's going to get.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
how it's going to get put in. And I'm not sure whether or not the board wants to go into, well,
We
obviously,
put in the request to have the parking installed in the first place.
I understand, was to replace other parking that was removed.
Yeah. Yes.
And I don't know if it's Tay or Carol, and who says that the best way of doing it is by doing it online with pictures so that they know what you're talking about.
I have pictures.
Is there any further discussion on this item?
Oh, can I interject for a second?
Please feel free.
Just some thoughts on this. So the removal of parking is always fraught with conflicting viewpoints.
That's for sure.
And so I think just putting it in, DOT is probably going to want to come back to the board. So it may make sense, put it in the portal and send a letter or send a request to DOT asking for them to study the location.
I think that's ideal. I think that works.
Coming from the community board, yeah, would probably be more appropriate.
You think we need a motion for that to that effect, or Carol Ann, can you just do it?
I can just do it.
Okay.
We should enter it into the system anyway, because that's how everything is tracked.
No, I understand. I mean, that's. Oh, hearing nothing further, obviously, that's what's going to happen. The next thing on the agenda is the chairperson's report. Crime, unfortunately, is trending back up. The new mayor is obviously concerned about it. I'm concerned about it. I was riding the subway, and I've seen more homeless in the subway than I've seen in a long, long time. And I'm obviously concerned about that. So these are issues that are coming up. Obviously we have the transit police we have a transit police headquarters in our district. We have a lot of things in our district, and unfortunately crime is pending back up, and hopefully we'll be focusing in on that.
Sid?
Yes.
I know we have the 84th and the 88th precinct have their meetings weekly. I think they still do that, maybe virtually, I'm not sure. But in the same vein, as we are asking the DOT to come and speak to us, I think on another major topic of this committee is crime, et cetera. Why can't we have or invite someone from the police department to speak to us about the rise in crime and what they're doing about it? So we are educated. And as Ernest said, when we're educated as a community board, we decide, we diffuse all that information to our local community friends and people. That's what we do. We talk to them and we tell them what's going on. I get tons of questions and I just tell them what's happening. Is it possible that we could sort of add some sort of a representation? I don't care if it's on a regular basis, but this is now a problem. It's rising, it's coming up, and it has to do with a lot of issues on crime control, not just homeless. It's a big subject. Is it possible to have someone, either the DA's office or from the police department, to speak to us, educate us about it? Let us know. We hear a lot of hearsay.
Carol Ann, can you, at the next cabinet meeting, can you ask that be done?
Don't have to wait for a cabinet meeting, thankfully. However, what we're getting back from agencies is they like to have specifics when they're coming to us. So we don't have to necessarily have 20 questions, but at least 5 questions, which they can then feed off from. That's the best way to get an agency in.
Ryan, you have a question? Or have a comment?
I do. I was wondering if I could share my screen for a moment. I just wanted to share the 88th Precinct's ComStat meetings from December 5th of last year. Thank you. I will make this a little larger. Can people see this?
Yep, looks good.
Thank you. So these are the 2021 numbers to this point in the year. That would be December 5th. So December 5th, 2021, December 5th, 2020. And if you look at all of these crimes, with the exception of other sex crimes, the crimes in 2021 are lower than the crimes in 2020. And it is true that 2020 had higher crime than 2019. But again, when we start talking about anecdotes, instead of starting with the data, it's very easy to see that we can have perceptions of what is happening that aren't necessarily grounded in what's happening. And if we looked at the 84th numbers, they might be different. But before, what tends to happen is that there are these stories, crime is up or crime is down, and they often tend to be untethered from the numbers. So before we start talking about what are we going to do about crime being up, we should take a moment to acknowledge that in some ways, or according to the numbers, in some ways, crime may not be up.
It's a week, I like to see if you have the January, do you have the January, that's December. Do you have the January report? Because January report's out.
Well, I can pull up the January number. I just thought that year-to-date numbers for December would be more informative than year-to-date numbers.
No, but they would normally have the year-to-date numbers if they would have the year 20. I think they had 21, the end of 21.
They have the January 16th of this year numbers, but the issue is because the year is so new that you're dealing with very small numbers, and those small numbers can have very different, something goes from 1 to 2, it's a jump of 100%.
No, I understand, but I saw the 21 over 20 numbers for citywide. All right, the 21 over 21 numbers for citywide show significant number of increase. The murder rate was up by some percentage. The 21 over 20 rates citywide was significantly up.
Sid.
Sid?
Yeah, go ahead, Ernie.
Unfortunately, the general public do not respond to data. Doesn't matter. Does not matter. Crime is a matter of perception, real or imagined, and that's how you have to speak to it. It's just a fact. One person's perception. I was in my car. This homeless guy was approaching my car. My wife got very anxious because she started being assaulted. I was being very dismissive, but I could not tell her that, based upon the data, her fear was unrealistic. I hope we don't get into the fact of trying to dismiss people concerned about crime by referring to data. It doesn't work. It doesn't speak to it. It is a matter of perception. We have to address it and respond to it on that level. But that's it.
We need to respond to it, but we don't necessarily need to say.
Brian, somebody else wants to speak.
Sid, in response to Brian and to Ernie, I think there's a combination of issues there. I agree with Ernie. There is, Brian, a perception of crime on the increase. Now, I think that's very important. Perception is very important. People fear. That's not good. However, there are statistics also. All I'm asking is that we have the police representative or the DA come and speak to us, because crime is on the rise. You could, as Ernie said, we could show a whole list of ComStat, and that's great. But talk to the person who was just mugged. We have to be sensitive to the feelings of the community and respond. We don't have to do it anecdotally. I'm not saying that. I think we should look at statistics, but we should understand that crime is up. We're a community board. We represent the community, and let's ask the question. That's all I'm saying. Ask the question. Showing us a chart doesn't answer the questions, as Ernie said. It doesn't tell us anything. It tells us it's up, it's down, it's not here. But crime in general, as Sid said, is up. And that is very disheartening for people, for business, for the city of New York. So I think as a community, it behooves us to have representatives come here and just explain to us what is happening, what they're doing about it, and how it's going to go forward. And then sure, show us the statistics. Nothing wrong with that. That's fine. But let us be at ease that someone is listening to us, hearing us.
But we also have generic questions. For example, what happens with the homeless? We can't answer those questions. We need to have the city agency representatives present to the agency called Community Board 2 with and be able to answer generic questions. We can develop questions, as Carol Ann indicated earlier, easily for any one of these issues that came up. And Sid, I did need to mention that there is some plan to do ADA access via the construction of these new high-rise buildings. I don't have the specifics on it yet. Carol Ann, I'm sure, can provide us with the specific information on how these buildings are supposed to accommodate it. But we've already done that in one instance on Flatbush Avenue for the Nevin Street station, and nobody knows about it. So I'm bringing it up. We only got $500,000 from one of the buildings, but this happens in the Land Use Committee. It doesn't come to Transportation and Public Safety. So the committees have to sort of talk with each other. The only reason we were able to get it is because I'm on the Transportation Committee when the construction of that particular building on Flatbush Avenue came up. And we made a request from the developer to actually install the station in the building. The developer told us no, but he would give $500,000 towards the installation of ADA compliance in the Nevin Street station. You're hearing this for the first time because it all happened in the Land Use Committee. So we have to follow up and get that information to the Transportation Committee and make sure that the Land Use Committee understands how this is supposed to work. That's apparently the next step on how to get ADA access.
John Quint, you want to say something?
Yeah. Both Ciro and Brian are both correct, because part of the problem is if it bleeds, it leads. So crime is always in the news. Crime may be up citywide, but I expect if we get somebody from the 84th and or the 88th to come to our meetings, they're going to tell us, and if the captain comes, he's going to say how great he's been doing because crime is down in our community districts. And hearing that may be reassuring and may be good at destroying the perception of members of our community. We're a community board. We're not let the mayor and the police commissioner deal with the citywide problems. But if in true, and looking at the statistics, and I'm sure the 84th is somewhat the same, that we are lucky to live in a district that either because of great captains and great members of the force, where crime is not as bad as it is in other community districts, and because the citywide numbers. But I think, because I know that's what we're going to hear, we've had people from the community relations, and we've had the captains, and we've had the street cops. I forget what their acronym is, who work in sectors A, B, and C.
Yeah, the sector cops.
The sector cops have all told us on the times they do come that, we're doing a great job and we're not in a high crime neighborhood. But at the same time, in talking about issues that are more than just our district, and that because I don't think there's an individual approach by precinct as to how to deal with youth crime, how to deal with homelessness. That there's, if we're going to deal with perceptions, then it's a good idea to have the precincts, somebody from the precincts, come to us. But I think that, but of course, for all we know, Borough Hall being a busy station, maybe has as many tracks and as Times Square. God forbid, in any of the number of train stations that we have within the district, something has happened as it happened in Times Square last weekend, we're going to have the same problem. But until that happens, and I hope it never happens, it would be good to hear about it. So I think we should have them come, but with the knowledge that that will work on the perception, but that we're not the people who have to worry about the rise in crime.
John?
No, Brian first. Brian has his hand.
Thank you.
Yeah, Brian.
So yes, I'm quite aware that there's a difference between the perception of things and the things, but again, I keep hearing crime is up, and then, well, it doesn't matter that crime may not be up in certain places, the perception. And so it's important, if we're going to talk about a perception, that we say there's a perception that crime is up instead of saying crime is up. I think that in addition to what John Quinn said about, if it bleeds, it leads, the NYPD has, certain beliefs about crime and political beliefs. And look, I served as an auxiliary in the NYPD for 9 years. I am aware that the department has specific political inclinations that, lead it to, give rise to certain perceptions about crime, just as much as anybody else in this meeting. And I think a comment that Juliet made before about when she was chair of this committee is that we looked at crime from not just the perspective of the police and the district attorneys, but about people who run alternatives to the court system and restorative justice. And I think that if we're going to talk about public safety and criminal justice, that we don't just talk about it from the perspective and the perception of those who are responsible for investigating crime and prosecuting it, but people who are people who are, I guess, in touch or who work with those who are accused of crime and who are prosecuted for it, as public defenders. I think that we need to have a broader sense of how we talk about crime that isn't just from the perspective of punishing people and giving or relying on certain perceptions when we have all these tools at our disposal, and we made a lot of them over the last several years.
The only
Hey,
problem.
No, Ernie was next.
Yeah, but here's the thing. The only problem is that the police themselves, their representative, will tell you that crime is up, and it's based upon the failure of bail reform. I don't know of any cop who do not say because of bail reform, we can't lock them up. They're out on the street, and believe it or not, you have a very moderate mayor in New York City. He's not on the extreme left. He's not saying defund the police. He's saying we got to deal with this realistically. He even acknowledged that Rikers Island is off the hook. Nobody goes there and come out alive. I mean, it's really, and that's not a data issue. That's a real perception issue, and it figures into how you address the issue. So we should invite the captain, and I'll be interested in hearing the response to this thing about crime is up. They'll probably be supportive of that perception.
Shiro, you want to talk next?
Yeah, I think we're all saying the same thing. I think, Brian, no one's saying that we're saying let's punish people. I don't think that anyone on the committee is looking at that. I think what Julie had said, and I remember those meetings, we want a holistic situation. So as a committee, what I was asking was, let's have the representative from all these areas speak to us, not just the police. I mentioned the DA and the other two other agents that we could have, so we could make a judgment and understand what's going on. You know, we live in this community, but many of us travel throughout the city. So when crime is up in the city, we don't live in a cocoon here. We take the subway, we take buses, we travel. We don't sit in Community Board 2. So if I'm taking the subway, the 2 or 3 to Times Square, I am in the city. So there is a perception of crime, and it comes about, and that is not good. So I'm not saying let's punish people. What I'm saying is, we are a community board. Let's put our antenna up and let's find out all the people who we can speak to and understand. As I said to you before, I diffuse all the information I get from our committee to my neighbors. I make it a point to sit down and give them all that information. They want to know it. So I'm their voice. And I think all of us are the same. So your point, Brian, is very well taken. Let us put together a list and invite these people and let's speak to them, have them talk to us so we know what's going on. And if there is a perception that's false, fine, let's understand it. But there is a crime issue and it's around and it's not good.
Okay, I'm gonna move the agenda along.
But Sid, I just have one final comment. Lincoln Wrestler, our council member, is assigned to the Public Safety Committee by Adrian Adams. That's his committee. So
he's also on the Transportation Committee.
So we need to invite him again to speak to this committee.
Okay. So then the next thing on the agenda is the other committee business is setting budget priorities. And one of the things that we want to talk about each week is budget priorities. You know, we've talked about before that the city may not have enough money for all the intersections and stuff like that. So that may be one. We also, the other budget priority we may want to set is having a DOT person assigned to the Community Board Transportation Committee. At least those two that you know, obviously there are lots of individual projects that we can discuss this, and that we should be thinking about as we go through the budgetary process each year. And I commend to you that for discussion. I also commend for you to think about what budget priorities, whether they're capital or expense budget items that you want to think about.
Sid, can we find out how the BQE cantilever truck redirection of overweight trucks, how is that working? And how has the fee structure for overweight trucks been implemented?
Well, we've asked DOT to come to make a presentation to us on what they're doing on those specific issues. They have said that they will be scheduling a community forum on that momentarily, and that we will ask them again to do so. We asked them to come to the committee meeting and to do that, but they want to do it to broader than just CB2. They want to include the other stakeholders, and we will ask them again.
Taya just put something into the chat, but I couldn't see what it was.
It's the you know, about the bill being passed. The weight and motion bill was passed, so that they will be able to set that and sign. It was passed and signed into law, and they will be able to set up the automatic monitoring. I have some issues because the same thing with people covering over their license plates. It's the same thing with the trucks that are really, but that's another issue. Community forum. Is there anybody who wishes to speak?
Sid, can I say something? Sandy?
Go ahead, Sandy.
So the WIM, the weight in motion law that was passed, you know, there's no plan for traffic. They want to get the trucks off. They're coming, I know they're coming down, and I'm told they're coming down Atlantic and turning on Smith because they're both truck routes. And um, I don't understand. I would like to know too, how this is enforced. Is it just technology and it sends a truck a ticket and then they're supposed to come back with a smaller load so they won't get a ticket, where they're going to get up on our streets? But there's no plan about anything. It's piecemeal. We've been talking about it all, well, you guys were talking about it all night. You know, there's no comprehensive planning, and we go around in circles. We did traffic calming, you know, we're talking about drivers, how they drive, and there's no, you know, in 1,000 intersections that are going to be looked at by DOT and the police, and they're going to try to come up with mitigations for, you know, it's just piecemeal. The drivers have to change their behavior, and the way that's done is by changing the road, not just an intersection. So, but as far as the BQE and the, you know, this weight in motion law, I don't see where it's going. So if we can get somebody, you know, Joanne Simon and Brian Kavanaugh were patting themselves on the backs about it, but what does it really mean? How does it work? I don't know.
My understanding is, as it's supposed to be a pilot project where the technology will capture the trucks that are, I think it's at least, I forget, I think it's at least 10,000 pounds overweight. And then they're sent a ticket in the mail, and the fine could be substantial. The fines, I think, start at $5,000 depending on how much overweight they were. So the fines are substantial, and that's what it was. You know, what they did temporarily is that the state police and DOT were weighing trucks as they came over the Verrazanos Bridge, and those that were substantially overweight, they turned around. But that has stopped at this point. So I'm not, other than sending him a ticket in the mail with a fine to be paid, I'm not exactly sure what they're going to do, or if they're going to target people for other enforcement as well. And Linda, you have your hand up, I see.
Thank you for remembering my first name. I have a question about Willoughby Avenue. Because the street comes, they closed it off from the park, Fort Greene Park, all the way down to Hall Street. And because of that, the traffic on Washington Avenue is congested. Then people like myself that are on Willoughby and Hall have to go to the corner of Myrtle, make a right, then make another right to come back to Hall to pull into the parking lot. So I was wondering if anyone has ever discussed stopping, opening up the street from, closing it down through Washington and opening up the Hall Street, between Hall Street and Washington, that very last street.
Is this the open street? Was this closed because of open streets?
Yes, and it's permanently closed now because DOT has come in and put in the signs and the barriers and everything. But what it's done is created congestion on Washington Avenue between Willoughby and Myrtle. Then on Myrtle, there's more traffic. And then if you live in the next block, you have to go all the way around to get back to Hall and Willoughby to come in. I think you see it. Yeah, Willoughby Avenue. Right now, it's going all the way from Fort Greene Park to Hall Street. But the congestion has been on Washington Avenue, over, you make the right, come around the block and back down, because I'm in Willoughby Walk.
So I'm also in Willoughby Walk. Hello, neighbor.
Hi, how are you?
Good. So you can drive a block to take a turn. I'm not very good at like mapping out in my head what you're trying to do exactly, but you are, as a local resident, allowed to go. No one's really enforcing it, but you can go a block and, move the barrier. There's no real permanent, like those signs, it's share the road 5 miles per hour.
But that's the point. Do you get out and move the barriers that are there to go in because we're local traffic?
Yes.
Or do you go, but the other thing too is it's actually backed up traffic on Washington Avenue and it's created more congestion on Myrtle Avenue when you go around the corner because they have to accommodate all that traffic. It just seems like to me.
Yeah, this is a great example of, is it an anecdote or was it already happening? I feel like Washington and Myrtle are always congested, like that's just the way they are. I don't know if we have that information. However, this is a DOT program. And so I would say, make a comment to DOT to change it. In my opinion, I'm right by that corner as you are. Those particular gates are always down because a lot of people do want to make that turn. It's almost like that particular one basically might as well not exist. Maybe not. I see it down all the time. But
It's
the other ones
not
are
when
out.
I go through because I'm
Yeah,
retired.
but I think a lot of other
so
people,
I'm retired, so I'm on during the day. Now I
Yeah,
can see that you feel like it's livable, and I can live with it. But you're creating a climate problem because you're driving longer to go around to come back. I'm not going to get out of my car and remove those barriers when I think they could just stop at Washington Avenue. So you're saying the communication that this committee shouldn't do that? I should handle that on my own?
No. Do you know who the sponsor of that open streets are?
Yeah, I looked on your listing and it had, it's some sort of Fort Greene project or something from the
link
park.
in the chat.
It's Fort Greene Park.
There's a link in the chat. That's the organization.
Yeah, this is as I understand it, I live in Fort Greene. This is this open street thing that happened in the beginning of the year, and this is a perfect example of the city violating the city charter. Actually, violating the city charter by circumventing the borough president, circumventing the community board for a private ad hoc group. I first became aware of this when I was going to Home Depot, and I went down Clinton Avenue to turn onto Willoughby, go to Home Depot, and boom, I was totally caught off guard. And I'm on the community board. I had no idea, who was responsible for this and how it happened. And then I'd start getting bombarded by questions from the broader community about what's going on, and I could not respond to that. Then I find out that, under the guise of an emergency pandemic program that de Blasio was able to push through some city initiative to create this program without any concern about the impact on the broader community. And it is now filtered over, not only on Willoughby Avenue, it's come all over to Fulton Street. I had a conversation last night with a resident who lives on Lafayette and Vanderbilt. That's several blocks away. It's filtered over. That seemed to be more important to the advocates and to DOT. And again, I agree with John Quint. We were sort of stunned by the fact that now DOT in this instance want to come to the community board to talk about East and Vanderbilt, but they just sternly just do that. I don't know what they expect us to do, and then to expect the broad community to buy into it. I just find that amazing. And other communities are reacting negatively to this open street and the open restaurant. And I think both programs are beyond the ability of DOT to manage.
Okay,
Ernie.
Ernie.
Yeah.
Ryan, you want to say something?
Yeah. There's a really good clip from The Daily Show back in 2013 when they opened City Bike, and someone goes, when did they hold the meetings? And the interviewer, after speaking with DOT, and they show this whole list of things all this outreach, just said, yeah, other than the 159 meetings, nobody said a word. And I feel like, I wouldn't presume to speak for other people you know, for every single person in our community district.
All right.
There's certainly a bunch of
I'm-
people who don't
okay.
like the open streets.
Ernie, let him
There's
finish.
certainly a bunch of people who do like the open streets.
All right.
But this was a program instituted by DOT, an executive agency of the mayor, and then it was made permanent by the city council. You know, unless we think that we outrank the council and the mayor, certainly the city charter was not violated when they made this program and made it permanent. But to Linda's point, Taya shared the email address of the Fort Greene Open Streets group, and perhaps it would be good to have these conversations with them.
Yeah, what I was trying to say is that that barrier is taking down so much because a lot of people are coming off of Washington, and it seems to be like that particular one, you know, it's almost like it might as well not exist because it's just down all the time. I'd like to see it up because I don't drive and I use the street, but in that particular intersection, it's down so often, I think, because of the traffic that wants to go through, that like maybe it's not, like, why even keep it up if it's going to be so just removed all the time.
And
So-
Nicole, what complicated it is those are all one-way streets. So it's not
Yeah.
like two-way that you can go this way or that
Yeah.
way. You just have to sit there and wait until traffic moves, go around, come back around to get where you're going. And like I said, I don't have any problems with bikes or open streets or anything, but I think when you've done it and you haven't thought out a process to do it where it's fair to everyone and consider the ramification. Washington Avenue is a very busy street.
It always was, yeah. But to that, you know, even what you and Brian were both saying, like, if something is changed, someone's going to be inconvenienced, whether that's a driver or a pedestrian or a bicycle. At some point, somebody's going to be inconvenienced, and you know, we can't make everybody happy. But you know, we do what we can.
Let me say something about this. Open streets is here to stay. Anybody who thinks that open streets is going to be reversed really is making a mistake. If anything, the city is going to be expanding on it. John Dew and I sat through a presentation on about Barcelona's street grid and how it's being done. And part of the presentation was made by Sean Quinn, who's the Assistant Commissioner of DOT, and who was very clear that if anything, open streets is going to be expanded. However, that does not mean that when a particular member of the community has a problem, that at least it should be considered and should be heard. Now, I get emails every day about people complaining about the stanchions, the new stanchions being moved and making noise and falling apart, the new ones falling apart. Yet they showed the ones in Barcelona, which are the same new metal ones we have here, and they have no trouble with them because I asked, all right? New York is a difficult area. We have a lot of people living very closely. People have to be considered. I'm an older person myself. I don't like to get out of the car and to move them, but I do. All right. And the reality of the situation is open streets are here to stay. It's perfectly legal. How they're going to be implemented into the neighborhoods is something that we can get involved in. But in the end, that's one of my concerns about DOT not coming to us and just doing things around us and not listening as well.
But I'm just talking about shortening it by that one street because.
Sid, can we move on now?
No, we're gonna finish listening to Linda.
All right.
Go ahead, Linda.
The only thing I'm like I said, I'm not against open streets and I'm not unhappy, but if it could be shortened by that one block, because it just shows that you have 2 or 3 people walking down the street that's closed off, and other things are being detoured and causing more complication in traffic. I just thought that one block, it should stop at Washington rather than going over to Hall Street. That was my suggestion.
And Linda, I don't know if you saw it, but they have given you the way to contact. Taya has put down the information of who to contact or try to get that done. We are supportive of your needs, but at the end, there is the sponsor. They're the ones you're gonna have to deal with. And Nicole, do you want to say something?
I'll handle it myself.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah.
Nicole,
Just to end this, that this is a good example, I think, of the type of information and resources the community board should have, like where to send people, like who is responsible.
It
for the
should come to the community board.
Right, but we don't manage the Open Street program. This other organization does. So we need to be able to know that, so that if somebody has a question or wants to be able to get involved or have a complaint
No,
or loves it.
should be, and I.
Well, it's not. So we need to know
Ernest,
where
Let
to
me
send
finish my
people.
point. Finish my point.
Okay, finish. Go ahead, Ernest. Go
Most
ahead.
community concern comes to the community board and not to some outside group. That's basically trying to negate the functioning of a charter agency community board.
Okay. Anybody else in the community forum?
Me,
Who's me?
Carol Ann.
Okay, Carol Ann, go ahead.
So this probably didn't belong in community forum, but I took too long to unmute myself and we moved on. So going back to the discussions that we had regarding needs statement, what we want as priorities for all the members on the board. There was a time there were district level consultations with the agencies. I just want to put it out there that that still exists. But what we would have to do is somewhere around next 2 months is we're going to have to create a set of questions to forward to the agencies and have them come to maybe our May meeting or April meeting actually, where we can get the answers we need. And then we can formulate our budget priorities. This year, we're going to try to get the priorities in June because we'd like to do the public hearing early, have the board vote in September. So it allows us time to create the narrative that's required for the needs statement. So I just wanted to put that out there. We talk about getting the agencies in. We can bring them in on sort of a district level consultation type event. And it would probably take a little longer than 2 hours. We're going to figure it out how we want to work it, but just know that that is an option for our questions and budget requests.
Should I have one final item?
Oh, Brian's hand was up first.
Okay.
Thank you. And just to, sorry, I wanted to respond to Caroline, so thank you. Nicole pointed out in the chat that, one of the roles we play, and I think several have said so tonight, and Ciro said it, saying that he disseminates information from these meetings to his, neighbors, is to be a source of this information. And I was just taking a look. I know that the board, offices, always understaffed. And so thank you for your efforts. But I was looking through the resources, and it would probably be good to have the different open streets groups listed there. And I was wondering if it were possible to volunteer to help to beef up the resources page. I would be happy to do that, to go through and try to find lists of different civics, and I don't want to go through the whole list of every single organization possible until doing that, but if possible, I would gladly volunteer to help add more links and information to those pages. Thank you, Taya.
Yes, Brian, we'd welcome that.
Hey, John, you have something? John, and Taya, you want to say something? Your hand is up.
Oh, no, that's just my thumbs up.
Okay. Go ahead, John.
Carol Ann, did the community board get a request to sign on to a letter that all of the community boards sent to the city of New York about the Open Streets program? Because most of the community boards signed on to a letter that said to the city of New York, whichever the agency is, I don't recall, probably Department of Transportation, that the open streets should go through the community board.
It was not a single letter for all community boards. There might have been a letter maybe from the Queens group of community boards, such like there was no letter that was representative of all the boards, no.
It was outside of Queens. Queens was included, but it was all of the boroughs as I saw it. I'll have to Google and see if I could find it.
Okay. All right, could I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second,
Sorry,
Ryan?
sorry. Did we do other business?
Oh, we were in the community forum.
Sorry, I just thought those two were the same.
We
I
did
think
other
they're-
community business. We did when we're talking on setting, but you want to, we can go out of order. Go ahead, Brian.
Thank you. So what the conversation we were having at the beginning of the meeting, we were talking about, what roles that we hope the board can be, or sorry, the committee can be. And I think we should probably try to agree, not tonight, but have some sort of conversation about what roles we want to play, whether that's an informational role, or whether we want to, have an advocacy role, or do both. I think that we've often done both. But we're talking about how we haven't been as effective as we want to do in the past. And I think it would be good for us to set a goal or two that we believe is achievable along these lines, so that we can then, commit ourselves to it. I think we don't really have a way of knowing whether or not we're being effective unless we say for example, the AMI working group, right? People said, hey, we think that the AMI numbers used for the city are in Brooklyn are totally off, and we want to push to find what they are for Brooklyn, and then push our elected officials to include these numbers or use these numbers instead. And certainly, we can't solve that problem. It's a federal issue, but we can advocate to do it. So I know a lot of us disagree, but there's probably things that we have a fair amount of agreement on, such as getting more involvement from DOT. So I think it'd be good for us to set some of those goals, and then we can sort of come back to them, because otherwise I feel like we spin our wheels and say we're not being effective. And we don't even know how to be effective if we don't have some metrics to measure it by.
Yes, Sarah.
In response, I think, Brian, we brought that up at the beginning of the meeting when we talked about trying to set up an agenda and pick out subjects, and then take those subjects and then follow through with them, whatever those subjects are, whether it's transportation, safety, or other issues. We talked about at the beginning. I think that is the framework we should look forward to doing, and maybe we can start that after this evening.
What's the next step?
I think we did that all night. We took definitive action. We voted on something. That is setting up a standard. That is setting up expectation, and we're going to get feedback from what we established. I think we already started that. I think we could do a lot more of it, but I think we started that tonight. I think this committee made it clear that we need to be much more proactive. We cannot just sit by and allow our community, frankly, to be ignored, and we have nothing to say about it. We are on this community board as voting members to advocate for our community, not to sit by and whisper. We did that tonight. Thank you.
Okay, the motion, do we have a motion to adjourn pending?
Yes, you do.
Seconded, all in favor?
Oh, I just had one last comment about why I also have my crash stats for the month. I originally started sharing some of these statistics at the ends of these meetings, the ones that I could attend, because as a member of the community, I'm not on the board or the committee. I was thinking, well, what can my transportation and public safety community board do with this information about the community board that they advocate for, represent? If crashes are high or low, are they going up and down? Can they do something about that with that information? That's why I started sharing them. I can't, none of us, as we've mentioned, many of us have said in this session today, can know everything about what's going on in the entire district. That's impossible, but we do have information. We do, supplemented by anecdotal stories, experiences, So what is this community board doing to make it safer, make transit more accessible, to make the air quality better, to make biking safer, walking safer, driving safer, you know, and other non-transportation related issues. I know we focus a lot on transit here, but you know, homelessness, et cetera. What can the community board do with this information? And that's as a member of a resident, I would hope to see, rather than, you know, however many people are voting members, talk back and forth about issues that are important to themselves.
Okay.
Let me call you back.
And on that note, we will see everyone next month, and hopefully we'll work on,
Mr. Meyer,
yes.
do you see that request? I'm only elevating it because it seems to request some homework between meetings, which might be productive.
Which one's, who's this?
Is it possible to get the document that was displayed at the beginning of the meeting by the chair? If it's something we should work on between now and the next meeting, it would be good
Yes.
to have a next step defined.
Yes, I will be happy to share it. Who do you want me to share it with? Do you want me to share it now? Or do you want me to email it to,
Just email it to me.
okay, I'll email it to Carol. Elian. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.
Good night, Sid. Very good meeting. Thank you for this meeting.
You're welcome.
Good night, thanks.
Thank you.